The following is a conversation with Brian Hite, a Hollywood stuntman turned performance psychologist, a man who has lived physically and mentally on the edge, with over 30 years of experience taking hits, dropping with precision, and understanding risk like few can. Brian has learned how to thrive in high-stress situations. He's taken those lessons from the stunt world and applied them to the military, athletes, and leaders to help them build resilience, mental toughness, and focus when it matters most. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk Podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Ben Salah. Today, we'll break down what it means to master pressure, or let me say, as Brian would say, to redefine it entirely. Let's get into it. Brian, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
You've had a fascinating career. Take us back to the beginning. How does someone from jumping off buildings and getting set on fire to helping people master mental resilience?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I hated school my whole school career. From the time they put me in kindergarten right up until I ended up dropping out of college the first time around. Hated school, but there were two classes that I really enjoyed, and one was psychology, and the other one was drama. It was the acting and theater stuff. Those were the only two classes that I remember in any level of school that I really truly enjoyed. And it's just interesting that my career choices and the various activities that I've gotten involved with most stem from each of those. I now have a master's degree in sports psychology and a PhD in organizational psychology and work as a performance psychology consultant in terms of, you know, a lot of different populations, but with speaking and workshops, etc. And I've spent 30 years as a stuntman, working in film and TV and live shows, and just it's always interesting to me when somebody says go back to the beginning. I always think about those two classes because they were the only two that I enjoyed, and it's what my whole life has been built around. But they are seemingly very different. It seems like on the surface that when we're talking about psychology and the mind and academia and research and all of that, it's very different from the visceral, tangible, physical world of stunts and performance. But they're not different. There's a lot of overlap. And one thing that's been really cool in my life over the last year or so has been the joining of those two worlds in a way that hasn't happened before, meaning that previously I have woken up in the morning and just asked myself, okay, what hat am I going to wear today? Which person am I going to be? Am I going to be a stuntman? Am I going to be an author? Am I going to be a podcaster, a keynote speaker? What am I going to be today? And what area am I going to focus on? But recently, like I said, over the past 9 months to a year, I've really zeroed in on the high stakes performance arena, high stakes environments, meaning situations where the consequences really matter. They're really important. That may not be life and death. It could be money. It could be, social status. It could be whatever it is, but the consequences of performance matter. And that has allowed me to broaden out away from just athletes and performing artists into the corporate world, into the education world, which I care a whole lot about, and into the first responder world as well, which I had some experience working with when I did the decade with the military. So it's been interesting how these two classes, psychology and drama, initially pushed me into the stunt world and film and TV, and then dragged me into the psychology world, and now have kind of come together in a unique way that allows me to bring all of those experiences, the 3 decades of stunts, the decade of working with the military, the decade plus of academia, because I'm also a faculty member at a university, to bring all of that together in a way that allows me to stand in front of audiences and really talk about high stakes performance in a way that I don't think anybody else can.
Wow. What was the moment when you realized the mental side of performance was just as important as the physical?
Well, for myself personally, I don't know. I can't tell you a specific moment when I, for myself, realized that my mental state was premier in my ability to perform to my potential, meaning that making sure that my mind being in the right place was just as important as making sure that my body was in the right place prior to performances. I don't know when that was for me personally, but I can tell you that as just that in general and as it applies across the board, when that realization struck me was when I was a gymnastics coach, and I took some kids to competitions, these kids that I had been coaching for 3 months at that point. I was well aware of their physical capabilities. I saw it 3 times a week at practice for however many hours. But I took them to a competition, and it was I was incredibly surprised by my lack of ability to predict who would do well and who wouldn't. I had some of the kids who would do very, very well in practice do horribly at the competition. And then vice versa, too. Some of the kids who were very lackadaisical and disengaged or just not really paying attention or doing much at practice would go to the competitions and just nail everything in ways that I'd never seen them do. And for me, that was the moment when I realized, again, not for myself, it wasn't really connected to my own performance at that point, but in general, that the mind is such a powerful thing when it comes to performance. We think about, at that point, I was only focused on athletes because I was coaching the gymnasts, but we think about athletic performance, physical performance as being just that. It's physical performance. We need to learn physical skills. We need to learn physical strategies. We need to learn, we need to build our bodies physically to be able to do the tasks. And of course, all that's important, for sure. But the importance of the mental and emotional aspect of performance had eluded me up until that point. But from then on, it didn't. And that realization started my journey down the sports psychology path. Yeah. I had gotten my bachelor's degree. I'd gone back to college and finished it. Like I said, first time around, I dropped out to move to Los Angeles and do stunts. But after finishing the bachelor's and experiencing what I did with these athletes, I went back to school for the sports psychology master's degree and continued on with a PhD in organizational psychology, which is essentially performance psychology related to organizations, corporations, businesses, etc. But what was cool about it was I was immediately able to take that information that I was learning in the academic program, in the sports psychology program, and put it into practice, not only with the athletes I was coaching, but with myself in all of the different facets of my life. And that was another realization I think is important, is that initially, as I was learning these various skills about how to attend better and how to manage and regulate my arousal levels and emotions and really just keep my perspective in a productive place, all of that was being applied to stunts. And at the beginning, even more specifically to my stunt performances, whether it was in a show or a TV show or movie or whatever. But from that, I realized, these skills can also be used in the preparation phases, when I'm training to work, when I'm pursuing work, when I'm at auditions, or if I'm at meetings or networking events or what have you. I can use these skills there too. And then from that, I realized, well, these things are applicable across the board, but my whole life, whether I'm dealing with my kids or my family, my friends, I'm going through up times, down times, all of these different skills that I'm learning in this program, I can use in my regular life. And that became a huge realization once I started working with the Army, because they had a program that was sports psychology related, meaning that it was targeting specific performances from soldiers, shooting better, doing medical tasks better, finding IDs better, what have you. But then they had another program that was more broadly focused on resilience in general. So what are some tools and resources that we can have that and really exercise and leverage in those moments where life is challenging, not just at work, but everywhere. So it really has been a journey for me from the recognition from these gymnasts that the mental side of performance is absolutely critical and you can't ignore it, to the academic learning of the sports psychology principles and the application of those to my own performance and then to the broader performance arena with training and injury recovery, etc., and then to broader life of things completely unrelated to work, and just it's just regular life dealing with people.
Yeah. Going back to stunt, basically, we all seen these crazy scenes from, let's say, James Bond, Mission Impossible, you name it. They all have the wow effect, like, wow. How can someone pull something like that? But Brian, can you share with our listeners a story or two from your stunt career where the mental preparation made all the difference?
Yeah, well, it's funny how you phrased that. You called, the crazy scenarios, and it just reminds me, and we'll get into this because this relates directly to what we're going to talk about for sure. One person's crazy is another person's fun. So, for me, it wasn't crazy. It was a great time. I just really enjoyed it. So yeah. I mean, and there are there are a couple of different stories that I think are probably relevant. One is there was a show that I was working on. This was a long time ago. This was maybe 20 years ago. It was a show called VIP. Pamela Anderson was the star of the show, and my job was I was playing this bad guy or whatever, and I was in the back of a truck that was driving down the road, and there was a fight happening inside the back of the truck. We didn't see the fight happening, but we hear it. And then all of a sudden I come flying out the back of the truck and I hit the ground and roll. The truck's still driving away. Like, this is all while the truck is moving. And I hit the ground and roll, and a motorcycle comes whipping around me, and then another guy comes out the back of the truck, motorcycle whips around him, and then the truck takes off. So that was the sequence. Well, before that sequence happened, I personally was experiencing a lot of pressure. And it stemmed from a few different things. In that environment, there were some really big time stunt people who were there on set that day. People who were the stunt coordinators, the people who hired the stuntmen and set all the stunts up for big, big, big movies. And the stunt coordinator of the show who had hired me, he was friends with those guys. And, he had hired me previously, and I wanted him to continue hiring me. And the stunt that we were doing, which is coming out the back of a truck that's driving forward, the physics of that are complicated. And people literally it wasn't, I don't know how long before I did this, but somebody died. A Canadian stunt person died doing a very similar stunt coming out the back of a truck. He just came out wrong and misjudged the way the physics were going to work and got sucked back, hit his head, and he was dead. So there was a lot of pressure in terms of my own physical well-being, in terms of my performance being good, both for the stunt coordinator to make him look good and in front of these other guys so that maybe they'd hire me too, or at least not hire me if I did badly. So I remember that vividly, and it was a really stressful afternoon of trying to figure out, okay, so how am I going to do this gag and just trying to really focus on what I needed to do. And I struggled. This was, again, earlier in my career. I didn't have the knowledge and resources that I had later on. And I just remember struggling. I ended up coming up with, I did a backflip out the back of the truck. And that allowed me to, when you're in the middle of a backflip, you can see the ground. So I was able to see exactly where I was going to land. And I was able to, when the truck's driving forward, even though I was coming out the back of the truck, my body was traveling forward. That's the physics part of it. So I was able to tap and roll forward in a normal way that wasn't awkward. And everything worked out great. It was fantastic for me. Now, the next guy who came out, I don't know what kind of preparation he went through or what kinds of, things he used to try to figure out how he was coming out the back of the truck. But he came out wrong and cracked his head, and he was unconscious with blood pooling underneath him.
Oy.
And so when they called cut, I got up and I gave the thumbs up, the way, just let everybody know, because they're all the way down at the end of the street, and just let them know I'm okay. And the other guy, he wasn't moving. So I ran over to him, and I was calling his name, Monty. And he finally started to move around a little bit, make some noises, and I held him down, and I called the medic, and the medic came over. It turned out he was okay. But I only bring that up to say I don't know how he prepared, but I personally, even though I didn't have all the resources available to deal with the stress and pressure as well as I could now. I did have some, and mental imagery was one of the ones that I used in that situation to try to figure out, okay, so what if I come out this way, then my body is going to be in this position, and that will allow me to turn this way. So I was using mental imagery to try to figure out what to do, and then to practice it in my mind, to go through that in my head, because I couldn't practice doing the backflip out of a moving truck. That's just not something you practice. So I was practicing it in my mind. And so that was, mental imagery was a really powerful tool for me in that situation. And I bring up that story because it relates directly to another story that happened only a few months ago. And this was on a TV show called The Righteous Gemstones. And it was a very similar stunt. I was in the back of a truck. It was driving down the road, and my job was, when the thing hit a bump and the back of the truck popped up, it was an SUV this time, I came out the back, hit the ground, and rolled. So it was a very, very similar thing. But my state, physically, mentally, emotionally, prior to that stunt was completely different. The situation wasn't different. I still had a stunt coordinator who was coordinating this show, and I still had, there was very famous actors and other stunt people standing around watching me get ready to do this thing. But I experienced no pressure at all. None. No pressure, no stress. I was just there. I was present. I was focused on what I needed to do, the position my body needed to be in, etc.
Yeah. Does it has to do, Brian, with the preparation?
Because I think based on what I've read, because I've read a lot about this idea of pressure, which we'll get into, I'm sure, more specifically later. But
and you mentioned pressure 4 times, by the way. Huh?
Yeah, and because it's something that I hear it all the time, and I hear it. We'd have to perform well under pressure, or we need to perform well in pressure situations or high stress situations, and I don't think there even is such a thing. I don't think that there are high pressure situations. I don't think there are high stress situations. I think there are just situations in which we can experience pressure or we can experience stress, or both. They're two different things, though. They're not the same. And I think a lot of people will conflate them. They think that stress is pressure, pressure is stress, and they treat them the same. They're not the same for important reasons. But the more that I started to realize, it's not the situation itself. It's how we're looking at the situation. As soon as I started to realize that, I started to question, okay, well, what were those moments when I experienced a lot of pressure and stress? What was going on? Where was my attention? How was I thinking about the circumstances? And in those situations where I wasn't experiencing pressure or stress, what was different about that? And that's what led me to the story I just told you, because the juxtaposition of the earlier one where I felt a lot of pressure and stress coming out the back of the truck, and then the exact same situation, I'm coming out the back of a truck with a lot of people watching me, I didn't experience pressure and stress. That led me to really delve more deeply into, okay, well, what is going on? And yes, a lot of it is experience. So experience and confidence go a long way toward, and I would say that the confidence mostly probably comes from the experiences that we have. But if we go into these situations and we really believe that we're capable of achieving what we're setting out to achieve, which is what confidence is, it's that belief that we're capable of doing something successfully, then stress and pressure tend to go away. And there's a reason for that. And I think that it probably would be great right now to just even define what those terms mean and where they come from, and then what differentiates them. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah,
I mean, because stress is, go ahead. Yeah,
we'll come back to stress versus pressure. We're going to come back to that, and we're going to elaborate more. But working in Hollywood stunt and consulting for the military both comes with extreme stakes. What do the people who succeed in those environments have in common?
Well, the military is a different beast, because that one, there are just so many people, and not everybody is working in high stakes environments. I mean, they just aren't. There are the cooks and the people working in support roles, and they're important roles, and they create conditions for the people who are actually getting shot at to do their jobs well. So you really have to distinguish between the people who are in harm's way on a regular basis and those who aren't, because the stakes are very different for each of those. But if you're talking about the people who really are the tip of the spear, who really are going out and achieving what, they're doing their job in a place where the consequences are big, where it's very possible that they won't be going home. And stunts is the same thing. Sometimes you go in and do a stunt job and it's a fairly easy thing. You're sitting in a car, it's not that big a deal. The chances of injury aren't that high, or screwing up or whatever. And then there are the other cases where it really is a situation where if you get it wrong, you may not walk away.
Yeah.
At least on your own power. Like I was saying in that other story, that guy went away in an ambulance. He ended up going home later that night, but he didn't walk away from the set under his own power. So there are those situations, and if those are the ones that we're talking about, I don't have a magical answer to what makes some people successful and what doesn't. I can tell you that one of the things that I have noticed, and it's not even one thing, it's just a combination of things. And this is where I came up with the acronym that I use when I work with clients, and that's FACT, F-A-C-T, FACT, focus, arousal, confidence, and tenacity. And the answer to your question, it was the same question I've asked myself. What is it that we really need in these circumstances to be able to be at our best? And those are the 4 things that I came up with. So when I talk about focus, what I mean is where our attention is and how our attention is. Is our attention broad? Is it narrow? Is it internal? Is it external? Is it focused on task-relevant things, or is it focused on the future, meaning the potential consequences that may happen, or the past, things that have happened in the past, rather than what's going on in the moment? So where and how are we paying attention? Arousal is what many people will also confuse pressure and stress with. Arousal is just our level of pumped upness. It's the amount of energy activation that we have. It's, how awake are we? How alive do we feel physically? Because for any given performance, literally anything, there is a right amount of energy activation, of pumped upness for us to perform to our potentials. And we need to know what that is. We need to also know where we are in relation to it, and we need to have some strategies to make sure that it's where it needs to be and stays there. So that's arousal. Confidence is what I mentioned before. It's just our belief in our ability to do something successfully. And when we have that belief, it goes a long way toward keeping our attention where it needs to be, and keeping just reducing distractions along the way, being able to communicate effectively. Just so many things go along with enhanced confidence.
Yeah.
And then the last thing is tenacity. That's just simply perseverance, grit, stick-to-itness, because things don't... Goodness doesn't happen overnight most of the time. It's something that we have to continue to pursue for periods and through times when things just aren't, when it's not easy, when it's just challenging to get ourselves going. So that's tenacity. We need to figure out how to make sure that we're able to keep our goals in sight. More importantly, keeping the reasons why we've even set those goals in the first place in sight. And that can help tremendously when we come across the inevitable challenges that happen in any type of goal pursuit.
Yeah. Brian, you've said the ability to perform under stress or pressure comes from being present. How do you teach someone to stay in the moment when so much is on the line?
Yeah, well, I would rephrase the question, because I wouldn't say that keeping people's attention focused in the moment is what they need to do under stress or under pressure. I would say that if people's attention is in the moment and on the task-relevant activities, then they won't experience pressure or stress at all. That's what I would say. So how do you keep your attention there? You identify what the most important things are. What can I control right now? What are the things that I need to do that are going to move me a little bit closer to the objective that I would like to achieve? That's a lot of what it comes down to. I mean, it truly is the mindful awareness practices are really helpful for this. But the ability to again identify what those task relevant things in the moment are, and then put our attention on those and put our full engagement into those, that's from an attentional standpoint, what we can do to help eliminate stress and pressure, setting conditions for us to be able to perform to our potential.
Was there ever a stunt where things didn't go to plan and
Oh, yeah.
you had to adapt instantly?
Yeah. That happens. Well, as I was doing live shows, it would happen, I don't know about every day, but but a lot of days, because things go wrong. It's a live show, and sometimes the pyro go off, sometimes the motorcycles break down, sometimes people forget where they're going, sometimes wardrobe, costume things get caught on set pieces and get, any number of things happen. So when I was doing live shows, it happened all the time when we had to do it. And it's funny that you bring it up, because I remember very early, in fact, it was the very first year I was doing that stunt show. I remember getting yelled at by the director because I was so bad at adapting, because something would happen, the motorcycle would stall or whatever would happen, and I would just stand there. So let's take the motorcycle stalling. I would try to kickstart the motorcycle, and the show's going on. The music's happening, everybody else is doing their blocking, and there's me just sitting on the stage trying to kickstart a motorcycle. And he would yell at me about that, and I, because you can't just sit there. I mean, you could try to start it a couple times, but at some point you just gotta figure out something else. And I was very bad at doing that. And I credit live shows with how good I am now at that adaptation, at being able to encounter those unexpected, volatile, situations, and
because of the yelling.
Just wasn't because of the yelling, but it was absolutely because it was required so often. It just, the shows, things would go wrong, and you just had to deal with it. And the same thing happens on film and TV sets too. I mean, on those, it's easier because they just call cut, reset, and everybody starts over. Live shows, it's not like that. But yeah, I can tell you for sure there was a car hit that I did, being hit by a car. Which I've done probably a dozen times over the course of my career. And one of the reasons I enjoy doing those is because of the unpredictability. You can plan how you're going to hit the hood and the windshield. You can plan that part. But after that, you're just along for the ride. And you have to figure it out in the air, how you're going to come off the car and where you're going to land and how you're going to land. I mean, all of that. They try to plan it out, or like, okay, this is going to be this, and we're going to do all that, and you're going to land right here, and I don't know, maybe sometimes they're right, but more often than not, it's just something you figure out while it's going on. And I remember working on a show, it was a movie called Special, and I had done this car hit, and I knew where the camera was, I knew where I was supposed to land, but once I got on top of the car, I got, for all intents and purposes, stuck. My momentum had gotten stalled. I was spinning around like a break dancer on my back, and I was just thinking in my mind over and over, I got to get off this car. I have to get off the car, because otherwise we're going to keep going, and we're going to end up out of frame, and the shot won't work. It won't be good. So I got to get off this car. I got to get off the car. And I was doing everything that I could to fling my body off the car, and I finally did, and I went off the wrong side. But I at least came off of the car, and then the car went by, and you could see my body still bouncing, so it was an okay shot. Similar thing happened on a TV show called Hawaii Five-0. I was doing a car hit, and actually it was a double car hit. Two of us got hit at the same time. One guy went off to the side. I went up over the top. And toward the end of that, I remember just the position that my body was on as I was on the trunk of the car. I remember thinking, I'm going to my head. I'm going to land on my head. There's no way around it. Just the position of my body, the rotation, how it was all going on. And I just in that moment, I don't even know exactly what I did with my body, but I know I crunched a lot. I know I did that. Tried to put my chin into my belly button to keep my head off of the pavement, and I ended up landing fine with that one. But it was one of those situations where as I was coming off the car, I was thinking about, this is not how I'm supposed to be doing this. This is going to end badly. But it ended up okay. So it does happen. The stunts, sometimes the stunts don't go exactly the way that they're supposed to. Things change, and honestly, sometimes it doesn't necessarily change so much in the moment. But where you have to figure out and really adapt is, okay, we've spent a week rehearsing this fight scene in this way. Then we get on the location and we realize, well, these moves aren't going to work because there's a pole here, or there are stairs over there. or the map that we were given was backwards and is completely wrong. And then you get into, okay, so now let's show the actor the fight, because we rehearse it with the stunt doubles, and let's show the actor the fight. Oh, wait a minute, you're left-handed, you're not right-handed? Okay, all right, so let's change all of that. And then you show the director, like, okay, do you like? Nah, I don't really like that. We need to get rid of this, and then do that. And then everybody comes to agreement on what it's going to be, and we sit around and we wait for while they shoot all the other things that have to happen, and that takes too long. So now they're okay. We got to rush. We got to go. Let's get to fight. And they're like, we don't have time to shoot this whole thing. So what are we going to do? Which parts are we going to cut? What are we going to put together? And then you have to change that at the last minute. So that's usually where once they say action, everybody's pretty much on the same page about what's going to happen, and usually it will go according to plan, although sometimes things are off. But the adaptation part happens in everything leading up to that moment where somebody calls action.
Fascinating. Brian, you argue that pressure doesn't actually exist. It's something we create. Can you unpack what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, first, I won't say that pressure doesn't exist. I mean, I've experienced it myself. It's very real when we are experiencing it. But I say that it's an illusion, meaning that it's just like any illusion. It's real if we experience our environments in certain ways. So, for example, there's a very popular illusion where it's just a picture. And if you look at the picture in one way, it looks like an old woman with kind of a big nose and a shawl over her head. And if you look at the picture a little bit differently, now it transforms seemingly into a young lady with a big hairdo, and nothing has changed. No lines have changed. No additional data has been added. It's the exact same image. But if our brains are perceiving it in one way, we perceive old lady. If we shift our perception, then we perceive young lady. And I think that pressure is the same thing. Our circumstances are what they are. They are high-stakes environments. They are high-stakes situations. If we perceive them in one way, meaning our attention's in a certain place, we're thinking about them in a certain way, we experience pressure. But if we're in the exact same situation and simply change the way that we're perceiving it, we change the meaning that we've assigned to it, we change where our attention is located, how we're prioritizing things, etc., well, now pressure disappears. So so it's not that pressure is not real. When we experience pressure, it's a very real feeling. It's a very uncomfortable feeling, and it's a feeling that limits performance. But it's not that it's not real, it's simply an illusion. It's something that we can rid ourselves of by simply changing our perspectives.
But then there is a contradiction here. I'm still not settled within the definition. So let's say pressure isn't actually a real, tangible thing. It's something we create in our minds. Is it right or no?
No, because it is a real, tangible thing, but it is also something that we create in our minds.
Okay. Let's say someone...
So, for example, let's say this. So let's say that you and I are just sitting here, and I say, you know what? Imagine a time when you were afraid. Imagine the time. Put yourself into that place, and whatever that experience was for you, but you experienced fear in that moment. What were you seeing? What were you feeling? What did your body experience? Now, if you were hooked up to electrodes right now, your physiology just changed.
Yeah.
And you probably experienced that fear, not to the same degree you did in the moment, but you experienced the fear. That was created by your mind. You're not in that situation. It's just your brain created it. You put yourself in a particular position. You perceived that situation as a threat. As a result, you felt fear. Now, if you put yourself in that exact same situation, and instead of thinking of it as a threat, something bad might happen to me, you think, this is an opportunity for me. This is a chance for me to demonstrate some skills. This is a chance for me to prove to myself that the work that I've put in has improved me to the point where I'm capable of succeeding. Now fear goes away and we start to feel excitement. Now, physiologically, our bodies, the sympathetic nervous system will activate and we will experience that same increase in breathing, increase in muscle tension, some sweating, etc., all those things that go along with sympathetic nervous system activation. But our perception of the situation is not a threat. It's now an opportunity. As a result, I feel joy. I feel excitement. I'm leaning in as opposed to trying to avoid, leaning out from the situation. So that perception, it's not the situation itself that will determine it. It's how we think about it. And all of that is created in our minds.
Clear. You often talk about energy activation levels. Can you explain that and how it help us find our sweet spot for performance?
Yeah, that's critical. And the terminology in the literature is arousal levels. But I think energy activation levels are probably, it's just easier for people to understand, but it is an incredibly important thing that people must understand if they're going to be at their best. Because like I mentioned before, any given performance, what this conversation you and I are having right now will happen to the best of its ability if each of us is at our ideal energy activation levels for conversations like this. That's going to be the case. Now, if our energy activation levels are too low for whatever performance we're engaged in, then we're not going to do well. We will feel physically weak. We will feel like we're dragging, like we're heavy. Mentally, our minds feel almost the same way, like they're heavy, like they're incapable of grasping material that we know is in them, of solving problems, of thinking clearly. Emotionally, we tend to be more volatile. The emotions tend to be up and down and strong, and our patience levels tend to be less. So this is what happens when our energy activation levels are too low. When our energy activation levels are too high, physically, we can be very antsy, very agitated, mentally agitated as well. We can't latch on to any one thoughts. We have too many thoughts. When somebody's talking to us, we're busy thinking about what we're going to say next rather than actually listening to what they're saying. Emotionally, we may be anxious and nervous. So this is when activation levels are too high. When energy activation levels are just right, though, that's when, physically, we're not necessarily relaxed, but we're calm. We're in a place where our muscle tension is ideal, where we can move our bodies in ways that are productive and helpful. Mentally, we can latch on to information. We can really hear what other people are saying. We can process cognitively the information that we're dealing with in that situation, whether it's coming from somebody else or if we're trying to communicate something ourselves. Emotionally, we're calm. We're in a place where there can be joy and excitement and we can lean in, but nothing's too strong and we can manage those emotions. So that's what I mean by too little, too much, and just right energy activation levels. The important thing to remember about that, though, is that for me personally, for Brian Hite, any performance that I choose will have a different ideal energy activation level for me. If I'm getting hit by a car, I'm going to need a different energy activation level from doing a podcast, which is going to require a different level of energy activation from doing a fight, which will be doing a different, which will require a different level of energy activation from a conversation with my spouse. Any performance will require there is an ideal amount of energy activation, but it changes from performance to performance. The other important thing to remember is that between you and me, if we're talking about the exact same performance, so we're here doing this podcast together, I may need a different level of energy activation than do you to perform to my potential. In other words, maybe I need a very high energy activation level to feel like I'm performing to my potential in this moment, whereas you may need a lower level of energy activation in order to perform well in this particular performance setting. So again, it's not the setting that will objectively determine what energy activation level any one person should have. That's an individual thing. That's unique to each of us. So that's energy activation. And I'll get into the pressure and stress part once we get further into that. But that's a critical thing, really understanding that energy activation levels are critical and that there are a lot of ways to to manage them and to regulate them. In fact, I'm just going to get into it right now. So when we experience pressure and stress, the arousal levels tend to go up. And that's what I think. So when I hear some of the pushback that I hear sometimes from people when I say you need to eliminate pressure and stress in order to perform well, what I hear from them is, no. I need pressure and stress. Pressure and stress make me perform better. I would say, I don't think they do. But if they do, it's probably indirectly through arousal, meaning when we experience pressure, when we experience stress, the sympathetic nervous system activates, the physiological boosts that we get from sympathetic nervous system activation happen, and as a result, we have higher levels of arousal. And those higher levels of arousal may be very helpful in certain performance situations. So how did the arousal level get where it needed to be? The experience of pressure and stress. So it's possible that when we experience pressure and stress, that puts our arousal level into a place where we can perform well. And so we attribute the good performance not to what we should, which is our ideal arousal level, but to the pressure and stress that created that arousal level. So then the question is, okay, well, if pressure and stress are creating the arousal level I need and I'm performing well, then what's the problem? Why don't I just keep using pressure and stress? Well, anybody who's been under pressure and really experienced stress would probably answer that question very quickly because it's very uncomfortable. And not only that, it just an experiential perspective of it's just not very comfortable. From a performance standpoint, it means that our attention is in the wrong place. Because when we experience pressure, that comes from an attention to the consequences of a performance. Meaning, if I do this well, then. Whatever follows the then. If I do this badly, then. My attention is on what follows the then. If I do this badly, I'm going to get fired. I'm not going to have a job. I'm not going to be able to pay my bills. If I do this well, I'm going to get promoted. I'm going to be on the fast track. My life is going to be set. I'm going to have no problems. It doesn't matter whether the consequences are good ones or bad ones. If our attention is on those consequences and we put a lot of import on those consequences, meaning those consequences are very, very valuable or important to us, they really matter to us, that's where pressure comes. So if we're experiencing pressure, our attention is on the future. It's on those possible consequences. It is not in the present moment, right now, on those things that if I do them, will likely set conditions for the consequences that I want, for the outcomes that I want. So that's the other piece. So as far as arousal levels go, they are incredibly important. Are stress and pressure ways to elevate them and to get those arousal levels higher? Yes, they are. Are they the only ways? No, they aren't. Are they the best ways? Absolutely not. Because the cost of stress and pressure is too much. What it takes away from our ability to perform to our potential isn't worth the boost in arousal levels, particularly when there are other ways to boost those arousal levels.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I'm listening to you and I'm basically trying to remember when I was an elite coach. And one of the topic, Brian, that comes all the time with the athletes, it's what's the key or how can I reduce pressure/stress? And I remember very well, I give the same answer. The key reducing those factors is preparation. Soon we're going to talk about building resilience through failure, through success and stuff like that. But every time we talk about these topics, stress, pressure, I see pressure as an outside element. I see stress as an inside element. Depend on the day you have a game or you need to perform at your best, or even when you have a presentation and stuff like that. It's all subject to the level of preparation, subject that you are ready, subject that everything is in place, subject that, and of course we spoke earlier how you adapt when things goes wrong. It doesn't matter how much you prepare. If you have in a situation things just keep popping up like mushrooms, how do you adapt? How do you react? What's plan B, etc., etc.? Then, shall we say, you are faced with some kind of an external pressure that will boost stress. It's a constant topic, constant discussion, different explanations. And I had guests, I had a psychologist, sports psychologist. We keep talking about this topic. Yeah, but it's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, I just want to say, like you were saying, like, what do you deal with pressure? Pressure. You said you mentioned, or that you thought about pressure as an outside and stress as an inside, and the thing about stress, at least the model of stress that is very, very often used in the psychological literature, and the one that I think makes the most sense, is the transactional model of stress. It's by a guy named Lazarus and Folkman, who developed that. It's been around for a long time. But essentially what that model says is that stress is the result of two things. One is perceiving a situation as a threat. It's called the primary assessment. Yeah. So the primary appraisal is what they call it. So the primary appraisal, is this a threat or isn't it? May something bad happen to me or not? Like that's how stress begins. If we perceive something as a threat, then a secondary appraisal happens. And in that secondary appraisal, we ask the question, do we have the resources necessary to deal with that threat effectively? So if the answer to the first question is no, it's not a threat, then there is no stress and we don't need a secondary appraisal. If the answer is, yeah, this is a threat, this is a potential thing that could harm me, and then we move on to the secondary appraisal and we answer the question as, well, yeah, I do have the resources necessary to handle this. I've got what it takes. Yeah, that's where I would put high stakes environments. People who are going to perform to their potential will be there. So is it a threat in the sense that the consequences really matter? Yes. Can I deal with that? Do I have what it takes to be successful in this situation, to really manage the circumstances? Absolutely, I do. So that's the place. But if we answer that question differently, no, you know what? I don't think I have the resources to deal with this. And when I say resources, I mean physical resources, mental resources, emotional resources, social resources, maybe financial resources. There are a lot of resources out there. But if I think to myself, yeah, this is a threat and I don't have what it takes to handle it, then I will experience stress. So this is why I say two things. One is that stress is about the situation, meaning that it's about our perception of the situation itself, threat or not, and our perception of our ability to deal with that situation effectively. Mm-hmm. So stress comes in the situation. Pressure, on the other hand, that comes from consequences. That comes from a focus on the potential outcomes. Like I said before, if I mess up, then what are those potential consequences? That's not the situation. That's the future.
The future, yeah.
So pressure comes from a focus on the future of what might happen if certain outcomes occur. So pressure, I mean, by definition, it's got us paying attention to the future rather than the moment. Stress, we are paying attention to the moment, but we're evaluating it in terms of the extent to which it will harm us and the extent to which we can handle it. And neither of those situations puts our attention where it ought to be, which is, okay, so I acknowledge that the consequences are important. I get that here's the outcome. I've set my goal. I've identified the outcome that I want. I know exactly where I want to go. Got all that. Okay, great. How do I get there? What are the things that right now I need to do in order to create conditions for the success that as I've defined it? What can I do right now that will make it more likely that the outcome I want will happen? Because I can't guarantee it. There's nothing I can do that's going to guarantee success or guarantee an outcome that I want. But there certainly are things that I can do to create conditions that will make it more likely that the outcome that I want will occur. And those things will happen now. So the future is 100% determined by what happens in the present. It just is. Yeah. So by putting our attention on the future, we're missing the opportunity to affect that future. We're busy worrying about the future rather than affecting it.
Yeah.
To really change it. So So that's how I distinguish stress and pressure and where they're coming from. And from that, like I said, that's that. Number one, if we're not perceiving situations as threats, then we're not going to experience stress.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then what resources do we have? This is where your idea of preparation comes in. Because the more we prepare, the more likely we are to believe, probably, that we are capable of dealing with these things. We've practiced, we've prepared, we've thought through all the different scenarios. And so now, I may see it as a threat, I might see it as an opportunity, but either way, I believe I can handle the situation well. That's going to reduce stress.
Yeah. Let's shift gear and talk about risk assessment. You've spoken about risk mitigation in stunts, for example, making sure the rail is strong, the stairs are safe, etc., etc. How do these same principles apply in real-life decision-making?
Yeah, it's funny that you brought that up. I just had this conversation with my daughter maybe a week ago. She's a rock climber. She's 11 years old. She's really gotten into the sport over the last 2-3 years. She really loves it. And we were talking about risk and how to know what's too much or too little, or whether you should try that wall or whether you should not try that wall. And the way that I broke it down was this, that when we approach a situation, we do a risk assessment, meaning we take a look at it and we evaluate, okay, so how much risk do I think is present? And we can take a lot of things into effect. All those resources I mentioned before, I mean, those are all the ones. So my physical condition, did I sleep last night? Am I hungry? Do I have sore muscles? Do I have an injured joint? Mentally, am I focused or am I all over the place? Am I able to keep my attention here? Or am I thinking about the fight that I had with my spouse last night? Emotionally, and, et cetera and so forth. So we do a risk assessment in that moment. And I'm just going to use a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning very low risk and 10 meaning very high risk, to just talk through how I explain this to her. So I said, you get in a situation, let's say you're looking at the rock wall, and you do the risk assessment, and you say that the risk of climbing that wall is a 7.5. Okay, so that's your risk assessment. Well, you're not done, because that doesn't tell you whether you should climb it or not. So then what you have to do is, okay, ask yourself, well, what level of risk am I comfortable taking on? Because each of us has a different risk threshold. So whereas you and I might be standing in front of the same situation and even assess the risk in the same way, we'll both say 7.5. That's what it is. My risk threshold might be a 9, and your risk threshold might be a 4, in which case you're not going to climb it and I am. And that's, so when we talk about risk, we really have to, number one, figure out how we can make accurate risk assessments given our current state and the resources we have available. That can be a big challenge for people because they don't really, number one, even include all of the possible resources that they bring. In other words, sometimes people are blind to their strengths. They don't give themselves credit for being as good at something as maybe they are. So understanding our resources that we have available and doing an accurate risk assessment, that's the first part. Then the second part is, what's our risk tolerance level? What are we comfortable taking on in terms of risk? And that, again, it's going to be different for each of us, but we have to know what our level is. And I won't even say that there's an ideal risk assessment level, but I would say that if we're worried about it, that we need to ask ourselves the question, what are we missing out on if our risk threshold is too low? Meaning, let's say I go into a situation, I say that the potential risk on a scale of 1 to 10 is a 5. My risk threshold, though, is a 4, so I'm not going to do this thing. What am I maybe missing out on by having that risk threshold so low? And the flip side is true too. If I say that the risk is 7.5 on this thing and my risk threshold is 9, well, if my risk threshold is 9, how many things am I doing that I probably shouldn't do? Like what amount of badness am I experiencing because I'm too eager to take on risk when I shouldn't.
Yeah.
When the risk is more than what I probably had. So what? And it could be injuries, could be problems with social relationships. It could be money problems. I mean, but what badness is happening with my high risk tolerance? Yeah. So that's how I think about risk and how I was explaining it to her. So to just bring it back to her story. So if you're looking at this wall and you assess the risk at an 8 and your risk tolerance level, and it changes for different things. Maybe for bouldering, her risk tolerance level is at a 7, but for top rope, where she's actually attached to a rope and somebody's belaying, maybe the risk tolerance level is at an 8.5 or a 9, Yeah. So we have to know for ourselves what that is, and then we can judge whether or not we want to engage in that activity. And this gets to, I get asked all the time, you're a stuntman? You must be crazy. It's like you said at the beginning, you do all these crazy things. You must be crazy. You take all these risks. You do all this stuff. I'm like, no, there's no haphazardness to it. There's no just throw a dart at the wall thing to it. I look at every single situation and I evaluate it in the way that I just said. What is the risk? And if the risk is too high for me, then I don't do it. And if the risk isn't too high, then I will do it.
And Brian, was there ever a time you had to say no to a stunt because the risk outweighed the reward?
Yes, but not from a physical standpoint. It was I got called to do a job. It was a driving thing. And what they were asking for in the car was, again, we talked about resources. Part of our resources is our skills. My skill level wasn't high enough to do what they wanted in the car, at least consistently. What they were asking for was stuff that I could do if you took me out to a big empty parking lot, but could I do it with a camera, a foot away from the car, which is what they wanted. They wanted the tire spinning around the car, sliding right next to the camera. Can I do that? No. That's not part of my skill. Now, on a motorcycle, I can and have, but a car, no. So I had to say no. They called because the risk was too high. I could have hit the camera. I could have hit the cameraman. I could have, screwed up in ways that would have really caused some big problems. So the risk, as I assessed it in that situation, based on my skill level, was the risk is too high. And so even though it's literally when you say no to these jobs, you're saying no to thousands of dollars. That's what I had to do because it was just too high.
Yeah. Great. I'm going to skip a lot of, we can talk about this stuff for days. But let's shift gear to the lightning round.
Okay.
What's the most dangerous stunt you've ever done?
It won't sound like it, but the most dangerous stunt I've ever done is run across a roof and jump up on a ledge that was about, 2 feet high. And it wasn't dangerous because it was a high ledge. It wasn't dangerous because the ledge was narrow or anything. It was dangerous because on the other side of the ledge was a 50-foot drop to concrete, and I had nothing attaching me to anything. So if I screwed up or for whatever reason ended up catching a toe, and I would have been dead. You and I wouldn't be talking right now. So that's the most dangerous one I've ever done.
The scariest moment in your career?
The scariest moment. Well, I'll tell you, and this one's going to be not one that you expect either, but the scariest moment in my career has been, and I can't tell you a specific moment, but I can tell you the type of moment, is when I didn't know when I was going to work again. And my bank account was near zero. And I had no idea when the next job was going to come, or from where it was going to come, or how much money it was going to be. That's just part of working in this type of industry, where it's as soon as you finish a job, then you're unemployed again. I've spent most of my time being unemployed, and you just never know when you're going to get hired. So for me, those have been the scariest moments in my career.
Thanks for sharing. A book that has shaped your mindset?
Well, one particular book is Marcus Aurelius's Meditations. That's shaped my mindset a lot. And it's not a book, but there are a lot of works from Seneca. I have them in a single book, but it's a work, a compilation of his works. I don't know. Seneca just has an approach and a perspective that I think is a pretty phenomenal one. A more recent book there are. I would say that Adam Grant's book "Think Again" is one that comes to mind. He's a real big proponent. Adam Grant is a professor and organizational psychologist who works at the Wharton Business School at University of Pennsylvania. He's prolific writer, researcher. He also has podcasts and he writes these books. But yeah, his main thesis is we need to check in every now and then with our beliefs, and we need to evaluate them regularly in terms of whether or not we still believe them, whether they make sense given the new evidence and new experiences that we've had since the last time we checked in. And I think that's a great way to go through life. Just think again. Like, do I still think that this is right? I don't know.
Yeah.
So those are the books.
Yeah, thanks. If you could go back to any moment in your career, what would it be?
Any moment in my career. Well, I think that there are two points. One is when I left the Army job the first time. I did it for 2 years, and then I left and went back to LA to do stunts again. That was a great point in my life. I had recently gotten divorced. I was single again. I had reconnected with friends that I hadn't seen in a few years. I was still young enough where my body didn't hurt all the time, and I could do all the things fairly easily with gymnastics and flipping and all the stuff. And I had the opportunity to work on some big shows, the Twilight series, Green Hornet, some big movies and TV shows, doing some really fun stuff with some incredible people. That was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, yeah. One myth about Hollywood stunts you'd love to debunk.
That we're not crazy. And I have a PhD to prove it. I went for a lot of schooling to just double check because I heard it so often. You guys, you're crazy. I'm not crazy. That's the myth, because it's not all about you're trying to risk all the things and get hurt and all the stuff. It's not that. It's a challenge that's there, and it's not about craziness or a misunderstanding of potential risk or some macho prove things to people. That's not what it's about. It really is. It's a challenge like any other challenge. You get yourself into these creative, like, how can we create these things? How can we do these things in a way that tells a story and really evokes certain emotions in people? How can we do that? And then walk away and go home and live life afterward because we did it safely. How can we do that? That's what it's about.
Yeah.
At least for me.
Yeah. What do you do to unwind after, let's say, a tough day or a high stress day?
Well, there are a lot of things. I mean, I have a dirt bike and I love riding the dirt bikes. So if I can, I don't know that it would be it might be the following day that I would put the dirt bike on the trailer and go to the trail and go ride if that were possible. I also meditate regularly, and I do magic. I do close-up magic, so I'll practice some different things there. I juggle. I shoot pool. Sometimes I'll just sit and just watch some mindless TV show with my wife. I mean, we'll just sit or we'll just talk, or it depends. Sometimes we have our kids, and sometimes we don't. So sometimes even just engaging with the kids. How did school go? Or just trying to play something with them. A lot of different things. And I think that's an important thing to take away, is that it's not about, if you're feeling pressure, you're feeling stress, or you've had a rough day and your mood's down, like what is it that you do? It's what things can you choose from to do? Like have a lot, have a big list of things that you really enjoy, that there are hobbies. They're not necessarily things that move you any closer to being successful in any kind of work environment or any other thing. It's just stuff that you really enjoy. Have a long list of things you enjoy that you can choose from in those moments.
Mm-hmm. If you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who will it be and why?
Dinner with a historical figure. I would there are so many. I would say Jesus Christ, because
classic.
I think that religion's got him wrong. Like, I think that if I go to church and I listen to people talk, I don't know that they're actually giving me what Jesus would say. And so I'd love to go back and just to say, hey, all right, bro. So look, here's what I've heard. here are the things that I'm reading about you. Like, tell me what's really going on. I think that would be great. Another would be Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens. He's just the ability to bring humor and his intellect, but his troubled life too. You know, he really had some problems with gambling. You talk about risk; he was very bad I don't know if at assessing or if his risk tolerance was just too high, but he made a lot of money and then went broke and then made money and then went broke again. I mean, he's just an interesting guy. So those are two.
Something on your bucket list that you haven't done yet?
Skydive. I haven't gotten a chance to skydive. And you know what's interesting is my daughter just brought this up the other day. Again, she's 11, so she's too young to go skydiving. But she's made it clear that on her 18th birthday, which in the United States is when they let you go skydiving, that she's all in. That's what she wants to do. On her birthday, she wants to go skydiving. I told her that I'll go with you. I've never been. I think that would be great.
Yeah. Excellent. And lastly, one piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
For me, what's come up lately around that is opportunity, just the way that we conceptualize opportunity and what's necessary to take advantage of opportunities. Because I think that some people are under the impression that opportunities don't come along very frequently, but I think they come along every single day. They may be small ones, maybe big ones, but we have opportunities every single day. But I think that three things are required if we're gonna take advantage of them. Number one is we have to even recognize, first of all, when those opportunities are happening. We have to open our awareness up to possibilities that maybe we're not thinking about. And this brings me back to Adam Grant's Think Again. You know, we have to take our blinders off, so to speak, and open our awareness up to more things than what we think is how things are, because that will trigger those opportunities in our minds. Once we actually recognize an opportunity, okay, yeah, I see that could be an opportunity, we need to also be flexible, because we've already got our minds set on a certain direction. We have goals that we've set for ourselves, and we're moving in those directions. And that's great. But if an opportunity outside of that comes up and we recognize it, we have to be willing to flex, to change our goal from, yes, I know I said that I wanted to achieve this thing. I know I said I wanted to get a college degree, but this opportunity to travel overseas to a different country with this new job just came up. And I think, that for me, it would be a great opportunity. We have to be willing to flex and to change. And then the third thing, and this is where a lot of people get stuck, is, because it's hard, is that we have to have the courage to take the first step in that new direction. So we can recognize something as a possible opportunity. We can even, be willing to flex from one thing to another to say, oh yeah, it probably would be a really good idea for me to pursue this other thing instead of what I'm pursuing now. But we just don't have the courage to make that change, to take that first step, to move in that new direction, into that new unknown. That can be challenging. So that's what I would leave people with, is opportunities happen all the time. We just have to be open to them. We have to be flexible enough to change what we're currently pursuing in order to go in the direction of that opportunity. And we have to have the courage to take that first step, because the second, third, fourth, 1,000th steps are way easier. But that first one, that one requires some courage.
Fantastic. Brian Hite, thank you very much. It has been an incredible conversation.
Thank you again for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
And Brian, before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can contact you, learn more about your work, or connect with you online?
Yeah, my website is the best place, brianhiteglobal.com, BrianHite global, global.com. And you can go there, you can find out more about the programs that I offer. You can schedule a discovery call with me. You can just send me an email too if you want to, brian@brianhiteglobal.com. I will 100% get back to you. But if stress and pressure and that feeling of overwhelmedness or burnout, lack of motivation, if these are problems that you struggle with, please reach out to me. Take a look at the programs that I offer and just get in touch so that I can do what I can to help. I've been in all of those situations myself over the 30-plus year career in the various areas that I've worked. It's not a fun place to be, but it's not a place that we have to stay. There are ways out, and I love to help you get out.
Fantastic. And to our listeners, I leave you with a few words from the legendary Marcus Aurelius. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to download, subscribe, and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps us bring more powerful conversations and inspiring stories your way. And now you can watch the full episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. Join us there, hit subscribe, and be part of this growing community. Every like, comments, and share help us reach more people who need these insights. I'm Sid Ben Salah, and this is Pre-Zero Sports Talk Podcast. Until next time, keep pushing forward, embrace the challenge, and never stop growing. Bye-bye.